Well, despite strides women have made in academia in recent years, men still placed on a tenure track more often and have higher salaries. Opened in 1972, IU's Office of Women's Affairs dealt with reports of harassment, created network opportunities, and provided guidance for faculty and students. Though the office closed in 2012, the work continues in different departments. Benta Boutier reports.
The Office of Women's Affairs, or OWA, was initiated by women on campus who wanted better avenues of professional support. Jean Robinson headed the office from 1998 to 2003. She led one of its largest pieces of research, the Report on the Status of Women, published in 2002. It collected data on sexual harassment, salary, tenure, and professional supports for women.
You know, I didn't want this just to be a study that was just going to be put on a bookcase, and that would be the end of it. Nobody would ever look at it. And that's why we included recommendations.
When the IU provost announced plans to close the office and distribute its work, she worried that some things, like research, would come to an end.
There was kind of a community of people on campus who cared. I believe that still exists, but I don't know that there's any particular institutional structure that brings them together in the same way that Women's Affairs did.
The history of OWA can be found in the archives on the 4th floor of Wells Library. 40 years of correspondence, meeting notes, studies, and feedback are all there. Katie Pilichowski served as interim OWA dean in 2007. She shared Robinson's concerns initially, but says she's seen improvements like the development of the Center of Excellence of Women in Technology.
But the fact that it basically embedded responsibility very deeply in many places and improved coordination amongst those places in responding to those issues, I think it was the time. I don't know that it could have happened earlier.
She does think pay equity is an issue and wants a study published. According to the Chronicle for Higher Education, the average salary for a man professor at IU in 2020 was more than $133,000, compared to more than $112,000 for a woman. And more than twice as many men at IU have tenure than women, 687 to 324. On tenure track, IU has 203 men and 176 women. Eliza Pelvalco and Carol McCord's offices work closely together to address these issues of inequality. Pelvalco says IU is hiring more women, pushing them toward parity with men. And initiatives within her office, like the Scholarly Writing Program and Women in Leadership workshops, provide them with resources once hired.
We work really hard to not just create programs that will fill up people's time, but to really find things that kind of add value to faculty so that they can do their work without taking away the time.
The Office of Institutional Equity, where McCord works, addresses complaints of discrimination and harassment. Often if a complaint doesn't violate federal law or university policy, their offices handle it together. She dealt with complaints at the Office of Women's Affairs.
So to my mind, what I see is that Office of Institutional Equity, Dean of Students, and this office are really providing all of the services that we considered important at the time in a much more organized, systematic, and I would say thorough way too. So we also interact with one another about these issues.
IU adopted a new sexual misconduct and harassment policy in 2015 to outline guidelines for consent and avenues for reporting, and Title IX was amended in 2020 to cover employees. Jenny Kincaid, who heads the Office of Institutional Equity, says it has handled an increased number of complaints since.
I don't know that that means that it's happening more. I don't think it is. I think it's just there's now a place for those complaints to go more centrally.
McCord and Pelvalco noted more women hold leadership roles at IU and cite expansion of protected categories for discrimination and harassment as benchmarks of progress. Now retired, Robinson says having an Office of Women's Affairs made women feel like they had a voice on campus, even as progress was underway. She still comes on campus for IU basketball games, one of the areas she feels very encouraged by gender progress for the university.
Given that we have this superb women's basketball team now, there were a lot of women, many of them faculty, not in athletics, not in the School of Public Health, who worked really hard to get resources for women athletes, and that has improved enormously.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Bente Boutier.
The Biden administration announced last year it would reinstate Title IX protections altered during the Trump administration and add clarifying language for discrimination based on sexual orientation. Those changes are expected this spring.